Hi everyone, my name is Maryann Simson from Apex Media.
And this is Seth Miller from PaxEx.aero.
And this is the weekly wrap. This week in aviation saw Inmarsat and Apex pull together and execute the FlightPlan sort of aviation broadcast event. Tagline of that event being charting a course to the future. And this was something that Inmarsat's head of aviation, Dom Walters, it was his brainchild that he pulled together after realizing that we were missing out on a lot of networking events and important discussion with the loss of a lot of our spring trade shows that we're used to. Seth and I were both part of the event. Seth, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was great to see so many people from the industry come together. There was a lot of great content in there, a lot of things to think about, a lot of interesting statistics and data, and a lot of interesting just thoughts from people around the industry. I know you had some of the sort of concluding data, some of the statistics that came out of it from the surveys that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I did. We received a little bit of an update from the team at Ogilvy who helped Inmarsat pull the whole thing together. Today they said more than 3,000 viewers tuned in, which is really great because I know up until the day before they only had about 2,100 registered, so I think there was a lot of last minute buzz, people tuning in. 50 speakers and people from over 100 countries, which is great. They did some sort of Q&A stuff with the viewers during the event, and 43% of the viewers said they anticipate recovery to take 18 months to 3 years in the industry. 44% said that the industry was poorly prepared for this crisis. I think we'd agree. 36% said the government schemes have helped, but that the governments could do more. And this was interesting, I thought. 8 out of 10 of them said that they think thermal scanners will become a permanent fixture in the passenger experience or the airport experience, I guess, going forward. And then there was a further 9% only said that they think blood tests prior to travel will be the norm.
Yeah, there's some interesting details on the health stuff, and I know we've got to talk about that a little more later in the show. Before we go off into the health world and what the future of screenings looks like, I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the segments I helped with on FlightPlan and sort of the in-flight connectivity world that I love and hold so dearly. And one of the real interesting debates I feel like is whether Wi-Fi should be free. It's, as a consumer, of course I want it to be free, or to get paid to use it, but free is good enough, I suppose. And I want it to be fast and all those things. And there was some interesting back and forth between different people, different experts in the industry, talking about just how viable that is and what the odds are of that coming to pass. And so we had David Fox from Deutsche Telekom talking about how they've integrated the payment process into bundles that you can have on your cell phone plan. And so instead of having to pay separately, the system can recognize your phone via the SIM card or some other metric and just say, oh gosh, he's already subscribed to this, we'll just pass it through. So it removes some of that friction. There's no need to pay. It's bundled in. And so it sort of raises the question a little bit of, is it the cost or is it the friction of having to remember a credit card number or having to remember a username and password from a system that you only use once every few months, that sort of situation. And some of those challenges of getting the payments done. On the flip side, we had Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy get on and say that he wasn't so in favor of everybody getting Wi-Fi for free, that if users started to get it for free on the regular, they'd become entitled, they'd feel like they were entitled to that and would stop being willing to pay for it, and that perhaps either a freemium model or keeping it in a sort of paid offering in some other way makes more sense, just to make sure that the airlines and suppliers can continue to pay for it. And I certainly know that it needs to be paid for somewhere, but I don't like the idea that it comes from me. So I'm curious, do you have any ideas on which way that should go or will go?
Well, I think you're always going to have airlines who have different takes. A premium airline, like a Middle Eastern carrier, could potentially still want to offer that service for free after this is all over and money is tighter. But I think people don't mind paying for it on an aircraft. They kind of understand that they have to, and I agree that the friction point of making the payment and connecting on board is the most difficult part of the experience, and I have abandoned the effort several times in the past, especially on a short flight. By the time you get up to cruising altitude and they switch the Wi-Fi on, if it takes you more, than a few seconds to connect, you're like, is this the best use of my time? Oh no, here comes the drink cart, forget that. So, I like this idea of having it all sorted out before you get on, and then it's just, hey, would you like to surf now? Great, yes, I would. Since I was in the studio yesterday for the parts of the live portions of the FlightPlan event, I caught up with Dom Walters from Inmarsat, who shared with us what some of his main takeaways from the event were.
Everyone will have their different perspective on today. I think one theme is coming out, which is definitely one of the dominant ones, which is digital transformation of the industry. If we play back all the interviews this morning and later on today, we're going to hear this is a theme that comes again and again and again. And I think the key to that is that people believe that it's going to be part of the recovery. I think digital transformation has been a word out there for a while, but it's now going to accelerate, and I think it's no longer going to be a nice to have. I think people are going to see digital transformation as fundamental to coming out of this and becoming more efficient and effective in the airline industry. The second thing that which struck a real chord with me was Michael Gill's comment. And Michael, if you're watching this, please don't misinterpret. I may have misinterpreted, but I think in essence what he said was this is an opportunity for us to take a step back. We're slowing down, and let's look at that positively. Because if we take a step back, we're always racing around, delivering. We don't actually get the opportunity to take that step back and say, how can we improve? How can we improve? How can things look better? And maybe there is one positive we can take out of COVID. Things have slowed down. We can step back and we can just check and say, is there a better way to do it? Because we have a moment, there is a pause happening right now.
Some real interesting thoughts there. I tend to agree a lot on the sort of digital transformation stuff, and really look forward to seeing some of those things finally come to fruition and seeing what the improvements are going to be for consumers that come out of that.
Yeah, and I really like his point about the fact that we do have a minute to pause right now. I mean, I know that prior to this event, I was traveling to a dozen aviation trade shows every year, and watching presentations and hearing exhibitors, hearing speakers, all talking about this wonderful digital aviation. But it almost seemed like digital innovation, I should say, and it almost seemed like innovation for the sake of innovation, or just to keep teams busy and things like that. And of course, they were trying to improve the experience. But you wonder if they weren't like just sort of building things without a super clear aim. And I think now the aim is really clear. It's safety, it's security, it's getting things back online. And we do have an opportunity to sort of pause and find out who we are, reevaluate who our customers and what they really need, what's really important, and how can we use tech to get to that place, or back to that place anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to get there. I'm looking forward to it. You touched earlier on some of the healthcare concerns and how that's working through the current situation. We've had a lot of talk about people wearing masks, different airlines around the world starting to require that, and social distancing on airplanes. But I think there's a lot of focus also on the medical testing, and we've seen already this year, or in recent weeks, Emirates started with blood tests at Dubai. Passengers have to basically sit down, get pricked, and make sure that they are not carrying a disease before getting on the airplanes. That's happening. It's hard to see that as a long-term sustainable thing, however, as sort of the survey results bear that out. No one expects that to last long-term. There's some more interesting concepts coming up in terms of the sort of thermal imaging and other sort of types of screening. Just a fever scan isn't necessarily the best way to evaluate if someone's sick or not, but we've also seen things like Hong Kong Airport putting in some technology for decontamination booths and things like that. And that's something you found that seemed really, really sort of out there crazy, but also potentially useful to me.
Yeah, it's great. So this was an article published yesterday by the Moody David report about what Hong Kong Airport is doing. Well, not what they're doing across the board, but what they're trying anyway to see if it helps with the situation. They've got a pod, a unit, a TARDIS, almost a health TARDIS. It's called the Clean Tech. And it's basically a full body disinfection channel. So it's an enclosed channel they're using it to disinfect staff right now as a test. So basically you walk up to this thing. First thing it does is look at your face and reads your temperature remotely, just from scanning your face. And then these doors open up. You walk into the disinfectant chamber, and the door shuts behind you. It takes 40 seconds. And basically, it uses a technology called photocatalyst, which I did a Google search. And apparently, it's a material which absorbs light to bring it to a higher energy level, providing such energy as to react to a substance. I don't know. It's very scientific, but basically, but they think it works. So basically, the staff come out the other end of that, and they are clean. They are good to go. Could we be using it on passengers in the future? Who's to say? I mean, we thought the full body scanners were weird when they first came out.
Yeah, there's been a couple other companies out there touting sort of similar technologies of a full scan of blood oxygen levels and temperature and blood pressure and all sorts of things that can happen remotely. Which of these comes to pass long term, it's hard to say, especially since it's never quite clear what, sick really means in any of these contexts. We can scan for individual diseases and pathogens, but, is someone who has a mild cold all of a sudden never going to be allowed to fly again versus, that was never the case previously. So definitely some concerns, also some privacy and personal data concerns. Would any of this ever work in Europe, given the GDPR stuff? Hard to say, but a lot of people working on it, a lot of interesting things coming along.
And then just on the topic of airports, if this sort of, what the future of the airport experience might look like is interesting to you or to your company, there's going to be a Future Travel Experience Apex webinar on that on May 13th. So check that out.
One last topic that I found interesting, and it's something that hopefully none of us will ever actually experience as passengers, but the team at Delta Flight Products typically builds cabin monuments, interior retrofit pieces, and in-flight entertainment solutions. And there's not a lot of investment going on in the market right now with those things. Airlines have pretty much scaled back all that spending, but the U.S. government has some needs. They're looking for a way to transport their soldiers in case they happen to be infected with COVID-19 or anything else communicable. And they put out an RFP. Delta Flight Products responded and actually won the contract to build these pods. And they're basically giant shipping containers that have been fully retrofit to have a containment area, negative pressure, a little seating room out in front for medical staff to work in. And the whole thing can be loaded onto a cargo plane and carried anywhere in the world pretty quickly. It's a really neat idea. And as you can hear from the executives working on the project, it really plays into the key competencies that the Delta Flight Products and Delta Tech Ops teams have.
It's welding, it's pneumatics, it's electrical, it's fabrication, it's painting. Literally everything we do to keep airplanes flying is encompassed in the pod.
So anyway, really, like I said, nothing that any of us should ever be flying on, but great to see those staff keeping their skills sharp and doing something that's useful for society.
Yeah, I actually love this story. You can really hear the pride in their voices if you watch the full video. And they do mention in the video, too, that like 10 or 15% of the staff at Delta Flight Ops are ex-military. So I think for them, it's a real sense of pride to be able to help the people who are still in service in the unfortunate event that they do become ill. But on that positive note, we're out of time for today. So I'd like to thank you, Seth, for joining us. Thank you, everybody at home, for watching. Make sure you follow Seth, myself, Apex on social media, and check out the websites, too. See you next time.
Happy trails.